What's happening, everybody? Ryan Thomas, live here on the Thomas Take Sports Podcast, bring you another edition of the Thomas Take. And I'm very excited to start this episode off. UFC 235, last night's fights. For all the MMA fans, I'm going to recap the action right here, right now. UFC 235, a definite exciting card, a card that definitely brought excitement, a card that definitely brought entertaining fights, a card that definitely had its moments of boredom, shall I say, but nonetheless, decent card, not the worst card I've ever seen, but not the best card I've ever seen either. It's somewhere in the middle, a little bit towards the right as far as being good, that's kind of where I lean. So let's get started. The prelims offered a ton of action. Preliminary card, a fight that really jumped out at me was Diego Sanchez and Mickey Gall. Mickey Gall, young fighter, a guy that climbed the ranks, fighting guys like CM Punk, beating guys like Sage Northcutt. And I'm not really a big Mickey Gall fan, but he's somebody that the UFC has put a lot of their eggs into in terms of promoting him, and essentially what those that are, combat sports fans, what they would call this fight between Mickey Gall and Diego Sanchez, they would call it a stepping stone fight prior to the action. They would call it a stepping stone fight where Diego Sanchez, the 37-year-old former Ultimate Fighter Season 1 winner, is on his last legs. The best years of his career are behind him, and he's taken a lot of damage in his fights. He's been knocked out a bunch. So early on, you look at that fight, Mickey Gall competed at middleweight at one point. Diego Sanchez competed at lightweight at one point, and this fight was met in the middle at welterweight, and there was a huge size disparity, a huge size advantage for Mickey Gall. And Diego Sanchez fought the perfect fight. Diego Sanchez, rather than going out on his shield like another fighter that fought later on in the card, Diego Sanchez fought a smart fight. He was someone that was able to pretty much nullify Mickey Gall's stand-up striking by taking the fight to the ground and implementing a top pressure that Mickey Gall just could not handle. So that was what led to Diego Sanchez ultimately getting the W last night. And I have to say, that was a phenomenal event, turn of events in that fight. I was really rooting for Diego Sanchez. I respect Diego Sanchez a ton as being one of the old school, fighters of the sport, as well as my longtime UFC fandom. To see Diego Sanchez on the first fight of the preliminary card on ESPN knock out Mickey Gall in the second round, that was great. That was a good time. Another fight that really jumped out at me was Johnny Walker versus Misha Sakurov. Johnny Walker taking this fight on short notice versus Sakurov, who has been a very durable fighter throughout his career. And coming out of the Extreme Couture gym, 14-4 heading into this fight. Kachernov beat Patrick Cummins, but had lost 2 of his last 3, beating guys like Nikita Krylov, though, at UFC 206. Johnny Walker comes in with a lot of steam behind him, a lot of moxie behind him, and this guy is the real deal. I mean, he's rattled off so many wins inside the octagon. Winner of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 straight. Discovered on Dana White's Contender Series. So this dude is a light heavyweight to keep our eyes on. He's got 3 wins inside the octagon since November 17th, 2018. He's got 4 wins inside the octagon, counting this appearance on Dana White's Contender Series since August of 2018. So Johnny Walker, really, really something. If you look at his record, 17-3, 14 wins by knockout, 2 wins by submission. He's finished 16 of his 17 victories inside the sport of mixed martial arts. This is a guy that's going to climb the ladder, continue to climb the ladder, and ultimately could get a title shot in short order. The funniest part of the fight, the most adversity that this guy faced in the fight, was the fact that he knocked himself out while celebrating. That was something. That was really, it was just blew me away. Kind of, landed on his chin doing the worm and got hurt. That was just, how can you not somewhat laugh at that? Next on the card, in the preliminary card, you had Zabit Magomedsharipov versus Jeremy Stephens, the little heathen, longtime MMA fighter, longtime UFC fighter. And this was a big fight for both fighters. Jeremy Stephens, somewhere in the top 5. Zabit trying to break into that top 5 discussion. And I thought Stephens won the fight. It was a unanimous decision for Sharipov. And I've said this so many times, but the judging in the sport of mixed martial arts does it again. It strikes again as some of the worst judging I've seen in any sport, whether it's boxing, MMA, jiu-jitsu, in any combat sport. There's some really bad judging in mixed martial arts, especially in my opinion. So I'm going to chalk that one up for Stephens, but Zabit for sure won the second round, outstriking Stephens 34-12. I think maybe that round, being that it was the most dominant round, led the judges to kind of just pencil their scorecards in for Zabit. I know it doesn't work that way. The rounds should be scored one at a time, but I don't know. It makes it really wonder if they just scored that fight in the last 4 minutes, just saying, oh well, he was more dominant in one of the 3 rounds than Stephens was. But I thought Stephens fought well, thought he exchanged punches well, but it is what it is. Can't leave it in the hands of the judges. Zabit wins that one in close fashion. Next up on the card to kick off the prelims, you had former UFC bantamweight champion Cody Garbrandt coming back to the octagon. His first fight since his 2 straight losses to TJ Dillashaw. Both losses were by knockout to TJ Dillashaw, the current UFC bantamweight champ. And this fight was as important as any for Cody Garbrandt. This is probably the biggest fight of his career, the fight of his life, being that he had lost those 2 straight. I'm not saying that this fight was more important than those prior 2 fights, but when you lose 2 straight fights, 2 straight title fights by knockout, your next fight is the first fight coming back is very important. And before I really dive into this, I just want to say I mean no disrespect to Cody Garbrandt whatsoever. The guy's a phenomenal fighter. The guy has accomplished a hell of a lot in the sport and literally could retire tomorrow with his head held high and look at what he's accomplished in the sport and say, hey, I did a lot to make my mark in this sport. But man, I think personally he should retire. I don't care how old he is. I don't care if he's 26, 27, 28. The guy did not look good last night. I thought he looked very stiff. And it's very odd because I really go back to the Cody Garbrandt that I watched take on Dominic Cruz for the bantamweight title, the Cody Garbrandt that ultimately defeated Dominic Cruz. It was Cruz's first loss in quite a long time, 6-7 years, maybe even longer than that. And it was one of the most dominant challenger versus champion performances that I've ever seen in the octagon. And Garbrandt was elusive. He was light on his feet. He was chucking and jiving and dancing, and he looked phenomenal in that fight. And now he looks like a shell of his former self. Very slow, very stiff, throwing punches from the waist, not turning his shoulder over, throwing the same punch over and over again. And as soon as the exchange began, where it ultimately led to Munoz knocking out Garbrandt, I think it really essentially started when Garbrandt he took a headbutt by Munoz that he didn't like. And as soon as the headbutt happened, he got angry and just charged at Munoz with reckless abandon, and Munoz was blocking the shots. Some of the shots were coming through, but some of them were getting blocked. Munoz really was just waiting for the barrage to stop and then looking to counter and hopefully land something big. And I noticed as Garbrandt was throwing those punches, those winging punches that had no technique on them whatsoever, were just sheer aggression, sheer reckless abandon. Each punch was losing its steam. And with that, Garbrandt was starting to get tired, and it took one shot for Munoz to just pop him and call it a day. So very disappointed, to be quite honest, in Cody Garbrandt's performance, because his go-to in his losses, the same circumstance that led to his 3 losses, were what helped him lose last night. Or the same circumstances that helped him lose the title were what helped him lose last night. He cannot contain himself. He likes to stand and trade and bang, and his punches are so stiff. I think due to the back injury that he had at one point, realizing they had that back injury after the Cruz fight, I don't think he's been the same since. And if he wants to go out there and compete, who am I to say he shouldn't? But if I was Cody Garbrandt, I'd understand that, hey, I'm not what I once was. Maybe I take some time off, really rehab, really get back to 100% before I decide to come back. Now, going into this fight, Garbrandt took 6 months off, and I thought that was a good amount of time, but I honestly think he either needs more time off or he needs to retire. The training strategy, the go-to strategy when things get tough, for him to stand and trade. This guy is a phenomenal wrestler. I don't know why he doesn't take fights to the ground. I don't know why more guys that are well-versed in wrestling decide to just stand and bang. I know it's appealing to the fans, but it's not smart. You have to fight smart. You have to fight as smart as you can in order to sustain a long, viable MMA career. And that's the goal of every fighter. But for Cody Garbrandt, I don't know if that's his goal. I don't know what his goals are. I know his goal is to get the title back, and he's not doing that. Fighting the way he's fighting, continuing to fight the way he has fought these last 2 fights, especially 3 fights, I could say, as well. So that's how I see Garbrandt right now in a nutshell. And all credit should go to this Munoz guy who fought phenomenally, really embraced the storm that was Cody Garbrandt and picked his shots and waited for the right opportunity to throw a beautiful right hand, drop Garbrandt, and finish him. It was a fun fight to watch, and I will give it that. I just didn't think that Garbrandt fought smart. Onward and upward, you have Weili Zhang take on Tecia Torres in the women's strawweight division. Zhang, I thought, going into the fight, was a much better prospect than what they were giving her credit for. Her ranking in the rankings, she's really new to the sport, at least in the UFC. So this was a big opportunity for her to take a big win over Tecia Torres, who has fought the who's who. She's fought everyone. She's tough. She's durable. She's nasty. And I thought that this would be a good fight for both fighters. A win for Tecia would mean she's right back in the conversation, and a win for Zhang would put her, it'd be the biggest win of her career. And it was a unanimous decision, 29-28, 30-27, and 30-27. I honestly thought it was a 30-27 fight for Zhang. She neutralized her. She controlled her. She was on her back. She was against the cage with her. I thought that was phenomenal. A great performance for Zhang for sure. Welcome to the top 10 of the UFC women's strawweight division. Now we get into the meat of the card. Ben Askren, Robbie Lawler. I was really excited for this fight because I love the pure striker, pure grappler matchups, where you have a pure striker like Robbie Lawler, one of the toughest sons of bitches that's ever fought in the UFC, and you have a pure grappler, one of the best NCAA wrestlers of all time, Ben Askren, former Olympian. So there was going to be fireworks in this one no matter what happened. And there was. Talking about the fights prior to this podcast, prior to the event taking place, I stated that Robbie Lawler, the fight starts standing. Robbie Lawler's got to damage Ben Askren early, and if he can do that, he might be able to win. That fight really was a microcosm of so many different ideals inside the sport of mixed martial arts. You have two fighters that are championship level with Ben Askren. He's won titles. Robbie Lawler, he's won titles. Former UFC champ. And you start to see true, I mean, these two dudes are the cream of the crop. Still, Robbie Lawler still, Ben Askren still. 19-0, Lawler lost last night, but let's really dive into the fight here before I get flabbergasted. I already am flabbergasted by that fight. Lawler does damage Askren. He does accomplish his mission of damaging Askren. He does slam him on his head while Askren was trying to get a trip. He had his leg in between. Askren had his right leg in between Lawler's legs, trying to get a trip going. He was kind of clinging onto the back, where Robbie Lawler just kind of grabbed onto him, kind of spun around and threw him on his head in midair. Upon Askren, trying to, get back to his feet, Lawler did a real good job of maintaining top position and pressuring him and landing these big shots that would have finished anyone, would have finished any other fighter probably at welterweight, with the exception of maybe a stronger guy like a Woodley or a Usman. But Ben Askren eats those shots, gets back to his feet, and ultimately you have a cat and mouse game playing itself out from there. The fact that Ben Askren, in the same round of a fight, I believe, I could be wrong on that. Let me look that up just to be sure. No, I am right on that. In the same round of a fight, Ben Askren, when the moment they say go, Ben Askren goes out there, he shoots a double leg. Lawler always has had stout takedown defense, so that was something that was a dynamic in this matchup that I knew full well. Johnny Hendricks had a real tough time taking him down or keeping him down when he did take him down in their title fights. So I knew that Lawler, would try to keep the fight standing and look to and probably succeed in moments, but eventually it was only a matter of time before Askren got him down. But for one round of a fight, 3 minutes and 20 seconds, that was pure hell. That was pure hell for Ben Askren. And yet, he got back to his feet. He avoided the big punches from Lawler from that moment on. Got the takedown. Took Lawler's back. Then, weird scramble happens where he's still able to kind of get the choke. Has this bulldog choke. And here's where the controversy somewhat comes in. Askren has this choke on. It's a bulldog choke. He's turning his neck, squeezing on the choke, and Lawler is obviously in a really bad position. Herb Dean comes in and decides to check on the arm of Lawler, because that's the limb that he can see, whether Lawler's consciousness will go in and out, whether he's in and out or out of consciousness. And you're able to see that Lawler's arm was limp. So if Lawler's arm is limp, that means that he's about to go out. And Herb Dean wanted to prevent that from happening, so he stops the action. As soon as Askren lets go, Lawler is like, "Hey, Herb, what the hell?" Protesting the stoppage. Herb Dean's like, my bad. No, Herb Dean, not your bad. The ref's job, for any of you that think that this is a bad stoppage, the ref's job is to protect both fighters. If Robbie Lawler is being choked unconscious and the lights go out, that's never a good look for the sport, despite what the fans think of it being cool and, the guy gets his lights shut out. Moments like John Jones submitting Lyoto Machida come to mind. Jones had a standing guillotine on Machida. lets go of the guillotine and Machida just crashed to the canvas. That's not a good look for the sport. And Herb Dean is as professional a ref as any. He's right in the perfect position to see whether Lawler is unconscious or not. And he checked the arm. The arm went limp. As soon as the air was let out of the balloon, as soon as he let the choke go, the air was back in the balloon. It was almost as if Lawler was about to go out, and as soon as Askren let go, he was okay. Well, of course, if you're being choked, you're about to go out, the guy lets go, it's like you get the air back in your lungs and you're ready to rock and roll. That's what happened last night. I thought it was a fair stoppage. I thought Herb did what he was supposed to do, and I really thought that there was a hell of a fight. If people want to see it get run back, if they want to run it back and they want to do it again, that's okay. I'm cool with that. But if they don't, I'm cool with that too. There was a situation where Herb Dean put himself in the right position to check on the status of Robbie Lawler, and ultimately, I think Herb Dean made the right judgment call. You had over a minute at least in that round to minute and 40 seconds left in that round. Lawler was not getting out of that choke. That choke was tight. You couldn't even see Askren's forearm under the chin. That's how tight it was. That was a hell of a Hail Mary move by Ben Askren, and welcome to the UFC, Ben Askren. He got roughed up. He got touched up. Ultimately, he won that fight in the same round that all that took place. That was phenomenal. Phenomenal fight. And Robbie Lawler shouldn't hang his head. That was a great performance by him as well. Robbie Lawler, we'll see him make that comeback soon. And hopefully we see Askren make that comeback soon as well. I'm very intrigued by what takes place with both of those fighters after this fight. On to the co-main event. Whether or not Askren fights Masvidal or Till, we'll just continue with that just for a second. Whether or not Askren fights Till or Masvidal, the winner of that fight, or Lawler next, either way, I'm intrigued. Let's go to the co-main event, though. The fight of the night, the fighter of the night, the guy that really impressed me throughout was Kamaru Usman. What a dominant performance for the new UFC welterweight champ. I couldn't think of a better performance of a challenger versus a champ in recent memory, where you have a guy like Usman, pressure, and he implemented what he needed to do on that night. He did what he needed to do last night. Every which way, he drew that up in his mind of how that fight would go down. He knew what his game plan was, and he accomplished his game plan to perfection. Constant takedowns, constant pressure. I think every single round of that fight was a 10-8 round. I don't think Woodley even got a 9 in some of the rounds of that fight. So Usman, the reigning UFC welterweight champ now, there's no doubt about that. There is zero doubt that he is far better than what he's been given credit for in recent memory. This guy has really put together a hell of a run on his way to the top. And not just being a former Ultimate Fighter winner, but being 15-1. His only loss was to a guy by the name of Jose Caceres in CFA, which I don't even know. I think that's a Florida organization. In May of 2013, he comes up the scene, fights Hyder Hassan, fights Leon Edwards, fights Worley Alves, fights Sean Strickland, Damian Maia, Dos Anjos, Woodley. I mean, you see a true progression of his fighting career. And maybe was the fight to the average fan not that entertaining? Maybe not. There was a lot of clinching. There was a lot of holding Woodley against the fence. There was a lot of Usman taking Woodley down. But what I noticed, far more than anything, was Usman was essentially chipping away at Woodley's. Usman was chipping away at Woodley's cardio and was chipping away at Woodley's mental state, making Woodley guess at every which turn of the fight what Usman was going to do. Woodley was guessing the entire fight. And the more he guessed, the worse it got. The worse it got, the more he guessed. He thought, well, maybe is he going to shoot? Maybe is he trying to stand? And you saw in the fourth round, Usman basically was at an angle where he could have easily shot in and got another takedown. But he just started unloading bombs on Tyron Woodley. So it showed that Usman didn't just clinch, didn't just wrestle his way to victory. Every decision that Usman made within the fight, he was winning that choice. Every choice that Usman made, he was winning that choice over Woodley's answer. So that was a phenomenal performance, and I'm really excited for this guy. I think he's a great fighter. I think he's got a lot of tools, and as he said himself, he might not be the best striker. He might not be the best wrestler. Might not be the best Muay Thai guy or whatever you want to call it, but in terms of mixing it all together, mixed martial arts, he's phenomenal. He's going to be very tough to stop. I would go on to say that he's going to be the champ for probably a considerable amount of time. The guy's 31 years old and in his fighting prime, came out of the fight really dinged up, really hurt. Hopefully he's not hurt for too long because I want to see him fight again. I have new interest now in the welterweight division. I can't say I was ever a Tyron Woodley hater, but I can't say I was ever really a Tyron Woodley fan. I just felt like he could have represented himself and the sport a lot better while he was the champ. That's just my opinion. And I have no interest in seeing a rematch of that fight. I think Woodley would have to take on another fighter in order to get that rematch. And who would he fight? Who's there for him to take on? So we'll see. We'll see what happens. But Kamaru Usman, congrats to you. You fought phenomenally. And I'm really excited to see what they do next with his next title opportunity. I have a feeling he's going to be fighting Colby Covington, which should produce some trash talk, to say the least. Main event, Johnny Bones Jones strikes again. Jones winning another title fight, retaining that UFC light heavyweight title. Really virtually won every second of that fight. The decision for Anthony Smith to decide to not take the DQ win when Jones threw that illegal knee to the head was truly honorable. Anthony Smith could have had every right to say, I can't continue. He threw an illegal technique, all that, just to end the fight. But no, he fought phenomenally, even in a losing effort. The fact that he stuck to his guns and was able to just last the full 25 minutes. I think that's a moral victory in and of itself. I know moral victories don't exist to these fighters, but I would consider that a moral victory if I was Anthony Smith. Hey, a lot of people didn't count me in for this fight. They didn't think I had even close to a remote chance of winning this fight. And he lasted 25 minutes. So congrats to Anthony Smith for lasting that long. But I will say that there's a dynamic of John Jones' fighting style that really does irritate me, and that is the front knee kick. I feel like those need to be banned from the sport. I feel like those are just really dirty and really grimy and unprofessional. At one point, John Jones jumped up in midair and threw a front knee kick that missed, but you could really damage somebody pretty bad. I know it's fighting, and I know that's the name of the game, but I'm just not a fan of it. I'm really not, and I feel like it's ruined a lot of fighters' careers. I know when John Jones fought Rampage Jackson, he threw a lot of those front knee kicks and blew up Rampage Jackson's knee, and he hasn't been the same since. Not saying that Rampage would be a title contender right now at his age, but even when he was in his prime at that point, it took him a long time to come back from that. And I just don't think that's cool, especially for a fighter that has had all the indiscretions that John Jones has had. I just don't think it's a good look for him to continue to throw that technique, and he uses it a lot, and it's a technique that I just think it's the equivalent of kicking your opponent in the balls to me. It really is. But nonetheless, it's not banned, it's not outlawed, it's a legal technique. I just don't think it should be. And there was a lot of that during that fight. He's throwing the front knee kick, spinning back kick, spinning elbow. Anthony Smith let John Jones be John Jones. He told us he wouldn't, but he did, and it was unfortunate because I would have really liked to have seen Anthony Smith fight the fight that I thought he'd fight. It just wasn't the fight I thought I'd see. I thought I'd see Anthony Smith really try to go guns blazing, really try to catch John Jones early. And he was really throwing the same couple punches that he had thrown throughout the entire fight, the overhand left or the overhand right. There really wasn't much there for Smith in terms of opportunity. Jones fought. I'm not taking anything away from John Jones. This guy is one of the best of all time. There's no doubt about that. But I just thought that Smith didn't fight to his ability. He let John Jones kind of dictate the pace of the fight. You can't do that against John Jones. He'll eat you alive. As far as what's next for John Jones, that's a really intriguing question because he's cleaned out that division 2 times over. He's got a lot of new challengers. There's a lot of new fighters, guys by the name of Thiago Santos, Johnny Walker, who I talked about a little bit earlier. There's some guys out there for Jones to fight. It's just a matter of who and when. And there's obviously that looming DC fight that people keep asking for, but I don't think Jones is down for it, and I sure as hell know DC isn't down for it. But nonetheless, UFC 235, good card. John Jones defends his title, continues his greatness inside the cage. Kamaru Usman, a new champ, new welterweight champ. Very excited to see what they do with Kamaru Usman. I think he's going to be the champ for a long time. I think his wrestling is second to none in that division. Striking, he's got the power, he's got the wrestling. In terms of mixing it all together, he's dangerous. He's tough. I think he has GSP-esque ability, dare I say it. And I'm happy for him because he's really essentially what they call is climb the ladder. He climbed from the bottom to the top. I love stories like that. Ben Askren getting his first win inside the UFC cage. I never thought I'd live to see the day where Ben Askren would be fighting in the UFC, but here I was last night watching Ben Askren eat the hardest shots that you could possibly eat as a UFC welterweight from Robbie Lawler. The hardest punching welterweight probably in the division, I'd say. And on bottom, Askren's just taking elbows, taking punches. Then he comes back and wins the fight in the same round. Are you kidding me? That was really, really impressive. I don't care what anyone says. They can say I'm pushing Ben Askren or whatever. You can't take anything away from that except for the fact that, holy shit, this guy is as tough as he says he is. Robbie Lawler is a tough out for anyone. Very interesting. Anthony Smith, back to the drawing board for him. I think he'll be back eventually. I could possibly see him fighting Jones again in the future, but we'll have to wait and see. Munoz is now a top 3 bantamweight in the UFC bantamweight division with that win over Garbrandt. What the heck is next for Cody Garbrandt? What the heck is next for Diego Sanchez after that win versus Mickey Gall? That was a big one. Either here nor there, I'm Ryan Thomas. That was my UFC 235 recap. Very excited for the next event, UFC 236. Max Holloway, Dustin Poirier, 2 for the UFC interim lightweight title. Kelvin Gastelum versus Israel Adesanya for the interim UFC middleweight title. 2 interim titles are on the line. April 13th. Should be a good one. Take care, everybody.